Welcome to the world behind midnight. What you are about to hear was locked inside a federal archive for over 2 decades, not to protect national security, but to protect something far more fragile, the official version of reality. 17 operators, 32 days, 0 recovered bodies. The Caucasus Mountains do not give back what they take, and on the night of November 14th, SEAL Team 6 discovered that some things in those mountains have been taking for a very long time. This is Operation Awaken. This file has been unsealed. What happens next is your responsibility. 3:42 a.m. The last thing Sergeant First Class Kowalski's body camera, recorded before the feed went dark, was a shadow not cast by the mountain, not cast by the storm, but cast by something standing directly above him that should not have been there, and should not have been that large. The audio lasted 9 more seconds after the image died. If you've ever wanted to know what it sounds like when a man who has survived 3 combat deployments realizes, in the final moment of his life, that everything he was trained to handle has just become completely irrelevant, the file exists. It has been classified for 22 years. Tonight, you're going to hear what happened next. Sergeant First Class Danny Torch Kowalski had survived Fallujah. He had survived 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, and a black site operation in Syria that officially never happened. He had seen things that would shatter most men's minds and kept walking. He did not survive the next 4 seconds. The first claw came from above, 20 centimeters of curved black keratin punching through his sappy plate like wet cardboard. The second raked across his throat. The blood didn't drip. It arced, a dark crescent against the snow, steaming in the -19 air, freezing before it landed. The shape above him was not a bear. It was not a wolf. It stood upright, 8 feet of muscle and darkness, and it held what remained of Kowalski, the way a man holds a newspaper loosely, without much interest. Then it simply pulled. 17 elite operators, dead in 32 days. The briefing room at Langley had no windows. That was intentional. Windows implied a connection to the outside world, to daylight, to consequence, to the kind of reality where the things Colonel James Hargrove was about to describe simply did not exist. 6 men sat around the steel table. They were not soft men. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Kellerman had 17 confirmed kills, and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of granite. Ghost had run for solo exfil operations in denied territory. Morozov had a grandfather who had served in the Caucasus in 1943. He had never spoken about what his grandfather had seen there. Hargrove dropped the photos without ceremony. 17 of them, 8 by 10 glossy prints. The men around the table had seen dead bodies before. These were not simply dead bodies. These were statements. Program Awaken, Soviet in origin. 1943. They were attempting to create a biological super soldier using an existing subject, a naturally occurring entity, documented in the Caucasus region since at least the 12th century. He paused. We acquired the program in 1991. We continued their work. Kellerman picked up one of the rounds and turned it slowly in his fingers. What exactly, he said, are we being sent to kill? Hargrove's expression didn't change. Something that used to be human, he said. Mostly. 48 hours later, 6 black shapes fell out of a moonless sky. Halo insertion, 60 seconds of freefall in -30 air. The wind screaming past at terminal velocity, frost forming on visors, fingers numb inside triple-layered gloves. They landed 2 kilometers from Shatili, in silence so complete it felt physical. Ghost noted it first overcomes no wind, no animal sounds, no birds. In a mountain ecosystem at this altitude, silence like this had one meaning. Something in the food chain had frightened everything else into stillness. The village materialized out of the darkness. Medieval stone towers, some dating to the 9th century. The SEALs swept the perimeter and found nothing, no threats. But the hearths inside were still warm. Dinners on wooden tables, steam rising from bowls. A chess game, half finished. A child's boot beside a door. On the door of the central watchtower, Someone had carved fresh Georgian script into the ancient oak. Morozov crouched and read it twice. "Do not seek," he said quietly. "What is already seeking you?" They set up position in the watchtower at midnight. 3 on watch, 3 resting. Ghost took the high point with his thermal scope. Doc cataloged medical supplies with the focused calm of a man who suspected he would need them soon. At 12:47 a.m., Ghost's thermal scope lit up like a sunrise. The signature was so large, so hot, so absolutely overwhelming that his brain initially rejected it as equipment malfunction. Then it moved, and there was no mistaking it for anything mechanical. "Contact," Ghost said. His voice was level. Years of training kept it level. "Ridge bearing 047, 800 meters. He paused. "It's looking at us, Kellerman. Engage." 3 shots. The creature stepped aside, not frantically, casually, like a man stepping around a puddle. Then it began walking toward them. Not running, walking. A steady, unhurried pace up the steep, snow-covered slope. 280 kilograms at 20 kilometers per hour. Ghost cycled through 6 more rounds, 4 connected. The creature paused each time, a brief, contemplative pause, and kept coming. It hit the base of the tower at 1:03 a.m. The stone wall, 3 feet of medieval construction that had stood for 900 years, came apart like dry plaster. Kellerman was already moving, shouting contact, pushing his men into their prepared firing lanes. Tex unloaded a full magazine at point-blank range. The muzzle flash strobed in the darkness, illuminating the creature's face in rapid freeze frames. The black filaments, the gold eyes that were not simply luminous, but aware, the jaws opening to produce a sound older than language. The creature reached out and picked Tex up. Not with effort, not with urgency. It simply closed one hand around his chest and lifted him, the way a person might pick up a doll, and brought him down against the stone floor with a force that cracked 6 ribs. It set him aside, not dead, set aside. Morozov emptied his magazine into the creature's back. Black smoke rose from each impact. The wounds began closing almost immediately, flesh knitting together in real time, visible beneath the filaments. "Silver slows it," Ghost repeated, his voice cracking. "It's not stopping it." And then the creature stopped. It turned away from them, walked back through the hole it had made, sat down in the snow 200 meters from the tower, and looked at them. It stayed there all night, not threatening, simply watching with the patience of something that has been alive for a very long time. The temperature dropped to -22. The stars were indifferent and brilliant. The SEALs took turns at the scope, watching the thing that sat in the snow and did not move, did not sleep, did not feel the cold that was slowly eating through their gear. Snow accumulated on its fur. It didn't shake it off. At 3 a.m., Kellerman quietly asked Morozov what he knew. Not what was in the briefing files, what he knew. Morozov was quiet for a long time. Then, "My grandfather was stationed here in 1943. Before he died, he told me one thing. He said, 'If you find the old one still there, don't send soldiers. Send a healer.'" At 4:30 a.m., Morozov put his rifle down on the stone floor. The sound of it was very loud in the silence, not in defeat. And something more complicated in a recognition, like a man who has spent a long time walking toward a wall, and has finally accepted that the wall will not move. Doc picked up his medical bag, left his weapon on the floor, and walked outside. The cold hit him like a physical blow. Every step in the snow was loud, deliberate. The creature watched him approach without moving, and yet something in its posture shifted, something almost imperceptible, like a held breath slowly being released. The creature lowered its flank, exposed the 3 wounds from Ghost's initial shots, the silver rounds still embedded. The flesh around them dark and suppurating, burned away in ragged circles. Silver didn't simply slow regeneration, it poisoned. The wounds weren't healing. They were festering, slowly and painfully, in a body that had not experienced persistent pain in centuries. Doc worked without speaking. Forceps, careful extraction. Each round came out trailing thin black smoke. Each time a wound was cleared, the flesh began moving, visibly, unmistakably moving, closing from the edges inward, new tissue forming in real time, fur regrowing in a slow wave. 40 seconds. All 3 wounds closed. The creature looked at him with eyes that were gold and ancient, and, for the first time, not entirely unreadable. "You sent a healer," it said. The voice was gravel, and low wind, and something that resonated in the chest rather than the ears. English, precise and archaic. Like a language learned from very old books. Doc sat back in the snow. "That was the idea," he said. It spoke for nearly 2 hours. The team came out of the tower one by one, drawn by something older than protocol. They sat in a semicircle in the snow, rifles beside them, but not raised, and they listened. Her name, in Georgian, translated roughly as, "the old one of the high places." 1943. The Soviets had arrived with scientists and soldiers, and the cold certainty of a state that had decided the supernatural was simply an untapped resource. They had wanted to understand the regeneration. Her family had been taken apart in field laboratories. She alone had survived. And then, in 1991, the files changed hands. American letterhead, different scientists, same questions, same certainty. Program Lycaon had not ended, it had been acquired. Kellerman thought about the 17 photos on the briefing table. He thought about Hargrove's flat voice. "Killed the last one. The 17 operators," Kellerman said. "The previous teams. You killed them all." The golden eyes moved to him, held I wounded for the others were killed by the cold, or by each other, or by their own fear. A pause. "I have not taken a human life in 60 years. I find it distasteful." Kellerman held the radio for a long time without keying it. The sky to the east was beginning to shift, not yet dawn, but the particular deep blue that precedes it. The rest of his team said nothing. They didn't need to. Some orders come from command, and some come from something older. When they conflict, a man finds out who he actually is. Kellerman keyed the radio. "Situation?" Hargrove's voice. Kellerman looked at the creature, at his team, at Tex, alive with 3 cracked ribs, at Morozov, who had his grandfather's eyes. "Target neutralized," Kellerman said. "Mission accomplished." The most significant lie of his career. The creature slowly, almost imperceptibly nodded. It rose without hurry. No backward glance, no final display, simply the decision made, and the body following it. One step north, then another. The ridgelines accepted it the way mountains accept everything, completely, without comment. The snow filled each print almost before it landed. Within 30 seconds, there was nothing. There had never been anything. The mountain kept its secret, as it always had. They airlifted out at dawn. The birds came back as the helicopter rotors faded. First one, tentative, then others. The mountains were just mountains again. Doc wrote for 43 pages on the flight home, then deleted everything, then wrote it again differently. Months later, Morozov returned to Shatili alone and spent 3 days repairing the watchtower door. Ghost developed a habit of standing at windows at night, not with fear, but with the attentiveness of a man who has learned that the dark sometimes looks back, and has made his peace with it, and sometimes, in the high passes above Shatili. At the exact moment between night and morning, sometimes, the shepherds report seeing something, a shape against the pale horizon. 2 points of gold light, patient and watchful, surveying the plain below, not hunting, just there, the way it has always been there. 17 operators went into the Caucasus. 6 came back. What they brought with them wasn't in any debrief report, and the question that none of them could answer, the one that Hargrove never asked, the one that programmed Lycaon spent 50 years trying to solve with laboratories and silver bullets, that question is still open. It was never about what Ashkara was, it was about what we are. Subscribe to The World Behind Midnight to uncover the next operation before it disappears. Some secrets are best left behind midnight. Operation Lycaon, classified. What comes next? You decide. Drop Ashkara wins, or like Hayon wins in the comments. And if you want to know what Delta Force found in the catacombs under Prague, the file is already being prepared.